I figured I would also share one vivid memory that I have where I faced homophobia and where I faced discrimination in a way where I actually felt like I was quite threatened and potentially at risk of being harmed, verbally and physically. And I know that many men and women, people, just many people, have experienced this or continue to experience it, unfortunately. And as I mentioned in my previous video, I've been very fortunate, whether it's based on my own observation and caution or sheltering myself from potential scenarios that might have been potentially not as safe to be in or put myself in. There was one situation where I definitely didn't expect to happen. So I remember going to my youth group, my gay youth group, Gab, on Davie and Butte Street, now called Community. And at that point, it was called the Center. And within the first month of me being part of the youth group, I met another man, another boy, and we decided to date for a while. We dated for about a month. And I was still living, of course, I was only 15, 16. And I was living, of course, in my parents' place in Kerrisdale. And he and I were out for a walk, and I was walking him to the bus stop. And we were sitting at the bus stop at 41st Avenue and Elm Street, which is where the corner where there's a Elm Park. In case of those watching are familiar with the locations or the spaces in the city of Vancouver. So as we're sitting on the bench, we are holding hands and kind of holding each other and kissing a little bit and just being comfortable with each other and expressing our affection for each other. Simple. And I remember that when we were making out, I started hearing like a scurrying of several footsteps and what must have been multiple people. And I heard them kind of whispering or kind of like sharing exchange of conversation. And so as we're making out, I looked out behind me just to check behind me as a cross check, and saw that there was probably, I think, a group of 4 or 5 boys. I would say I would guess that they were probably grade 8 to 9, maybe. So maybe my age or a little bit younger. I don't think any older than that. But if this is the bench that we're sitting on and we're waiting for the bus, if you go slightly past that, there's a lot of tree. Like there's like a big tree that's kind of near the baseball field, and I remember that a couple of the guys went over there, and they were kind of gesturing, like two men having sex with each other and saying, like speaking in a graphic way, that was homophobic and not not very not very not ideal. Let's leave it at that. And so I noticed that I was starting to feel like I was getting shaky. I could tell that my nervous system was on fire. My fight and flight responses were kicking in. And and then they said some things, but they stayed away from us. But they were definitely passive aggressively, projecting their bigotry and their lack of acceptance onto me and the person I was with. So I forget what they said, but then all of a sudden I saw that they could tell that I saw them, and so they scurried away. They ran wherever they ran, somewhere out of the sight. And I looked at my boyfriend at the time, and he asked me if I was okay. And I was like, I don't feel safe right now. I don't know if I mean, I physically can't defend myself, and I don't know that these other people are going to come back and cause harm on us before we get on the bus. And so I didn't have a bus pass with me or a bus fare, so I couldn't get on the bus really, without having to pay. My boyfriend had a bus pass, so he was safe. Anyway, as we were waiting for the bus still, about 30, 40 seconds later, I hear from one of the alleys nearby. So like at the end of the block, turn the block, go down the street halfway, and there's an alley. The guys ran into the alley, and all of a sudden they just blurt out like it was so quiet, and the neighborhood itself was quite quiet, and I just remember shouting to the top of their lungs. They actually said the F word, and it was so piercing and traumatic to hear that in my own neighborhood and in a place where I would feel, even if it might be more conservative, wouldn't be subject to that kind of intolerance. And therefore my naivety, my gullible nature definitely was caught there. And I just shut down. I started getting really freaked out because I thought, what if this group of men come back for a second round? So thankfully the bus pulled up and I got on the bus, and my boyfriend said, can you let him ride a couple stops? He doesn't feel safe in this current area. There's something that kind of happened. Anyway, so I rode one stop up the block, and then I remember getting off the bus, and I don't remember how fast I was running, but I hadn't ran as fast as I had at that moment since I had done track and field in high school, the couple years before that. I was scared shitless in my own neighborhood, running up 41st Avenue through Kerrisdale, turning every single corner I could to get in a zigzag to get away from anyone potentially from that group of people maybe coming after me. And I remember tripping all over my feet because I couldn't keep up with my own adrenaline to run fast enough. And then, yeah. So of course I was okay, but it was for me and for what I'd been exposed to before that, which was not much at all, for my scope, it was traumatic, without discounting others' experiences, which may have been more extreme. And I think with the idea of it being Pride Month and with everything going on and contrasting what it was like even, let's say, 13, 14 years ago from now and where we are today, it's really interesting to see how tolerance and acceptance and celebration of people in general that might not be the norm, and also how other people that might express themselves in a different way, how there's so much more acceptance and honor and tolerance for those people, even if it's simply just sitting on a bench and making out with somebody, or walking down the street, or holding hands, or walking a certain way, talking, anything that someone could potentially look at and cause judgment. In Vancouver, at least, it's been very, very helpful to see that there has been some change, and it'll only continue to change the more that our society evolves together, and as we grow together, and as we learn to love ourselves and each other as fellow humans and fellow beings, and strip away the insecurity, or strip away the things that might separate us when maybe they don't have to separate us as much as we might have once thought.